So the two thoughts that you had were just very fascinating for me. One was this whole notion of collaborative consumption, and then this power of networking that helps us go beyond how we mobilize people. Let's talk a little bit more about that and see if we can have a bit of a conversation around how technology is playing a role within that.
The old paradigm that we're shifting away from is about acquiring stuff and owning stuff, and the more stuff you own, the better, and your value is demonstrated in society by the quantity and quality of the stuff you own. You've seen that bumper sticker that says, "Those who die with the most toys win."
Right.
That was like the old thing, is that
Right.
I own all this stuff, and ownership and hoarding. And increasingly, people are moving away from that because our houses are so cluttered, our garages are so cluttered. You know, the explosion of mini storage sites. Like, we have too much stuff. We're just buried in our stuff. We're spending our weekends putting our stuff back on shelves and untangling it and tending to it and maintaining it. And people are realizing that we used to own our stuff, but now our stuff owns us. We are devoting more and more of our life energy, our hours in the day, our money, our time, our space to taking care of all this stuff. And it's a burden, it's a drag. And so there's an emerging paradigm shift where people don't want to own, they want access to it. The access is what's desirable, not the actual ownership. So you see an explosion in things like Zipcar. You know, rather than buy a car, I have Zipcar, I have this little card. There's like 5 parking lots within easy walking distance from my house. Anytime I want a car, I can go and I pick from like 10 different cars and just use it and then put it back, and that's done. You know, I don't have to clean it, I don't have to insure it, nothing. That is so much easier than owning a car. Or Netflix, instead of buying all these videos, you just get it delivered, you watch it, and you return it. There's a shift to collaborative consumption where the idea is about access, and there's less burden, less responsibility. People want to live lighter. They can have all their material possessions into a smaller house. So that, I think the explosion of networking is happening within this broader paradigm shift that's moving back towards sharing.
And you think that networking and our ability to network today, which has allowed us to network more on a global scale, allowing that shared consumption to take place a little bit more effectively?
Well, I think the sharing inspires networking, and the networking inspires sharing. They both feed each other. For example, where I live in California, on my block, I have very, very good friends on the whole block, and we share everything. We have one pickup truck, one swing set, one hot tub, we one power saw, one wheelbarrow. We share everything, and so by having this kind of network in our community and sharing stuff, we all have access to all this stuff without having to own it all independently. Better for the planet, better for the budget, better for how cluttered our garages are. So seeing how, when people begin to share and see how sharing increases your quality of life, increases your access to ideas, increases the impact you can have, then there's a motivation for more networking. And then while there's more networking, that enables more sharing. So they really feed each other.
So I'm an architect by training. So I taught architecture at MIT for a decade before moving on to the nonprofit sector and then now into corporate philanthropy. But a lot of the work that we were doing at that time was on co-housing in the early 80s. And this kind of came out of the Swedish, Scandinavian notion of collective living.
Right.
And not every house needed to have a family, a dining room. You could actually eat, everybody didn't need to have a full kitchen. You could have a common kitchen, you could have a living room that was common. And that kind of never took off in a way that it should. There are a couple of co-housing developments here in the Bay Area, there are a couple of them up in Seattle, became more of a Northwest phenomenon. And as you're talking about it in describing your block, it's now kind of taking a very different way, that it's no longer a external design environment, but it's much more people coming together on their own in their existing environments and then figuring out how they can share.
Well, I think there's a spectrum, and that people find where they're comfortable on the sharing spectrum. So where I live, it's 6 houses in a row. We've taken down all the back fences, and we share, but everybody has their own kitchen, even though we frequent each other's kitchens often. So I think that there's a spectrum. But I think that it's moving more towards sharing, and it's partly because of the economic impacts. Why own your own lawnmower and cupcake pan and turkey pan and why own everything
Tell
yourself
me.
when you can share it? It's also the environmental problems. We simply can't sustain this level of individual consumption. It's also the network that facilitates sharing, so it's much easier, things like online sharing network.
Right.
But there's also, I think it's a response to the increasing social isolation that's happening in this country. If you look at the data about people's social networks, it's really sad. We have on average about a third as many friends as our parents' generation had. People in the United States spend 5 hours a day on average watching television alone. We're increasingly isolated. A growing number of people don't know their neighbors' names. 25% of people in the United States say they do not have one friend with whom to talk about personal issues. Can you imagine how lonely it is? And I believe that's because we are spending more time working than ever before. We work about 300 hours more a year than our counterparts in Europe. A huge number of people don't even take 1 week of vacation here. We have these long commutes, and then when we get home, increasingly our social life is isolated. It's staring at screens, and so we're lonely. And if you look at the studies about happiness and what really provides happiness, it turns out it's not a new iPad or flat screen TV or a pair of boots or whatever the advertisements tell us. It's very consistent across income groups, across ethnicities, across age groups. Once your basic needs are met, the things that actually provide happiness are not things, but the quality of your social relationships, having a sense of meaning or purpose in life, and the act of coming together with others towards a shared goal. And so sharing, networking, whether it's for social change or for community goods or repairing a playground or protecting the library or a bowling league or bridge club or book club, whatever it is, coming together with others and sharing things and working towards a common goal make us happier. And so I think that all of these things are creating this paradigm shift where we're realizing we right now have a surplus of stuff and a deficit of community. If we can shift and switch where we're investing our energy into community, we need more friends and less stuff. So networking is a huge piece of this transition.
Talk to me just briefly, about the role the new technology is playing in making that happen. Because we've always had technology, but we've never really been able to use it effectively to mobilize in a way where people are still independent and yet feel part of a collective whole. Do you see the new social media and the Web 2.0 that's playing a role? And where do you see community organizations can actually help you in your mission?
I think new technologies are playing a huge role, but I don't think that technology alone is going to solve this problem. I think that where the real value is where technologies are brought into a community where you have strong ties, good access to information, a collaborative, mutually respectful kind of culture anyway. Then if you bring technology into that, it is amazing how much you can reach faster, cheaper, broader. There's thousands and thousands of examples around this. I was working in a community in South India, for example, and they were concerned about their government there in Kerala wanted to build a garbage incineration. And my specialty is around garbage and waste. It was a disaster if they built this garbage incinerator, an absolute disaster. The government didn't care at all what this small local community there did. They spread messages out all over the world to say to people who love Kerala, which a lot of people love because it's so beautiful, they said, please help us. People from all over the world bombarded the Ministry of Tourism and said, we won't come to Kerala for holiday if you have this garbage incinerator. Who wants to vacation under this huge polluting smokestack? The Ministry of Tourism turned to the community and said, all right, help us figure out a solution. And now they're actually working together to figure out a solution without incineration. If this small community in Kovalam, they have a little project now, Zero Waste Kovalam, if they did not have access to communications and pre-existing relationships to communicate with all these groups, they couldn't have created the kind of muscle or leverage to get the Ministry of Tourism to switch. I mean, literally, there are millions of examples like that.
But that's a great story to end on. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And again, you were just very inspiring, great fun.
Thank you so much.
And we hope that we will continue, at least in our world, to continue to interact with you.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you.
Thank you.